Hi everyone, it's Anthony. Thanks for obviously tuning in. As promised, the Q&A Ask Anthony is starting today. So obviously just introduce myself to those of you who don't know me. I'm Anthony Hill. I'm a UK fitness model. I've worked with people like Jodie Marsh, Michael Stokes, Giles Crofter, and quite a few local people, as well as competing in Miami Pros. I'm going back to competing again this year. So yeah, I'm the director of Formidable Fitness. I'm in 2 gyms in Southend, and basically what I'm here to do is just try and give some knowledge over to people. There's going to be different areas I cover. There's going to be the clinic that I do here, which we do basically Q&As about diet, nutrition and exercise. And there's also going to be the exercise clinic, which we run upstairs in the gym, where I'll be going over things such as exercise form, different exercise techniques for different goals. But primarily a lot of this is just going to be learned as a learning resource for you guys. If you have questions, just message me and I'll do my best to answer them for you and make sure that you know about it on social media via like my YouTube channel. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to start with dieting tips. So the first question is going to be regarding macros. So a lot of people have messaged me and they kind of get a little bit confused with what macros are. A lot of this words drop quite a lot. What is a macro? So basically, macros, it refers down to 2 different types of food sources or 2 different types of qualities. You've got macronutrition and micronutrition. So macronutrition is something more emphasized really, or sort of more looked at, even though realistically micronutrition is equally, if not, is just as important. Macronutrition comes down to protein, carbohydrates and fats. That's basically it. So it's about having the right kind of balance and the calorie intake for a desired goal. Generally speaking, a lot of people who are talking to me are athletes or are trying to put on some muscle and just for aesthetic purposes really want to know how to sort of lean up. So covering sort of the macro system as such, protein on the average scale, it should be about 1.3 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So for instance, like, a 100-pound person would have to have 130 to 150 grams of protein ingested per day. So looking at this, one of the biggest issues I found when I'm doing these questions and answers is a lot of people actually looked at taking protein in and thought that basically the biggest issue, which is commonly misconstrued, believe it or not, is a lot of people just weigh the meat and assume that 150 grams of chicken is 150 grams of protein. Now, it's a common mistake and I get it, but it actually works out a lot differently. On my next video, I'm going to basically break down all the different meat sources and protein sources. It's also going to include for people like you who are vegetarian or vegan and are struggling to try to get the right amount of protein into your diet. So basically, for instance, I'll just give a little tip away. Chicken, actually a quarter of a chicken works out basically as pure protein. The set of 100 grams, about 20 to 25 grams of that is pure protein. So realistically, on a scale of ×4, if I'm a 100-pound man, I need 150 grams of protein. Realistically, if a quarter of 100 is obviously 25, which is the grams of protein from a chicken, I ideally need about 600 grams of chicken per day. So that's something that people don't really get their head around. A lot of people think, God, I'm eating so much food, am I going to put on weight? Ideally, if you're eating clean sources, lean sources as well of protein, I mean, I could put that in relation to, instance, you're going and eating, a beef burger, you're going to have to go and eat, a load of processed food to get anywhere near that sort of nutritional quality. But as opposed to getting sort of the fat and the fat intake that you would from like lean chicken, you're going to be eating beef, which is high in fat, and it's usually going to mess up your macros. So it's not just about looking at food for one thing. You can't just look at the meat and go, okay, well, whatever the meat is, as long as it gives me my desired amount of protein intake a day, that's perfect. Because in the real world, what will happen is if you neglect the fat intake, you might get your protein intake, but you might be ingesting far too much fat, and that's obviously going to have, a negative impact on what you're trying to do with your body. So protein, 1.3 to 1.5 grams. That's sort of the typical rule. Carbohydrates, basic carbohydrates are a thing that are most commonly manipulated by people who are fitness models or people who are exercising, who are trying to get in good shape. Carbs are something that people have got a real kind of phobia of, which is really wrong. You know, you're not supposed to cut carbs out, and I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some great fitness guys that actually do cut carbs out and they do pure keto diet. I mean, one of the guys who's really awesome, Rob Richards, he's kind of done it and he shows that it works. Personally, I've found from my own experience with cutting carbohydrates completely, I get very lethargic. I feel like I don't really have any energy to perform, and I just didn't really feel a massive benefit. I don't feel that it was a very sustainable form of dieting for me. And I think what we need to come to terms with here when we talk about macros and diet is it's about sustainability. This isn't something that is like a fad. You know, you're not going to go onto, for instance, a Weight Watchers or a Slim Fast and crash course for a week to 2 weeks, lose all this weight, you know, do a load of metabolic damage because you're not taking the right amount of food you should, put yourself in debt, or it's like starvation mode. The moment you come off of that grub and you go into real food, then you all of a sudden you put all the weight back on. You know, it's all a bit of a con, isn't it? Because then you have to do it again to lose the weight. So the real way to do it is having a sustainable, correct diet which ticks all the boxes, which is eating proper food sources from the earth, as organic as possible, and getting the most from it. But this is going to come into the micronutrition in a second. So protein, I said 1.3 to 1.5 grams. Carbohydrates, personally, I don't go crazy with them. I do like a rotational carbohydrate diet. So what I would do, basically 0.5 to 0.8 grams of carbs per pound of body weight for a day for 2 days, and then I would up that to 1.5 grams. But basically on my high carb day, what I would do is I'd have like a massive bowl of porridge, and that's sort of like how I manipulate and use my carbs. I can talk a bit more about my specific diet later, but you know, I suppose to maintain sort of a healthy carb intake, it would be sort of like a gram per pound of body weight. It really does fluctuate. It's the main thing that any bodybuilder or any person who trains plays with. If you're trying to bulk up, you're probably going to try and have a higher carbohydrate intake. It's sort of like a given. If you're trying to cut, that's the thing you're going to sort of taper down on. So the last thing as well, because it is kind of carbs that people have a phobia of, but the most importantly is I see people doing this all the time and it's really wrong. People look at fat sources and they think, okay, fat is a phobia, I mustn't go anywhere near fat. The actual matter of fact is fat has actually got some fat burning properties. You know, it's kind of like, how can I put it, you know, sort of like, it's like have a bit of a poison for the medicine sort of thing. You want to have a bit of fat in your diet. They say on average about 0.3 grams of fat per pound of body weight per day. If you're someone who is on a keto diet, you might be having slightly higher fat intake, mainly in your protein sources. So for instance, a lot more red meat and things like that. Some good fat sources to take on would be cottage cheese, peanut butter, cashew butter, nuts, you know, olive oil. The most important one, and one of the most, it's actually ranked as probably one of the most healthiest things you can take, is coconut oil. I use that a lot. I even put coconut oil in black coffee in the morning, but I can talk about sort of thermogenics and fat burning tips later. So realistically, just summarising, guys, answering your questions, macronutrition is down to what's kind of really calorically tapered. So protein, carbs and fats are things that kind of shape your calorie intake. Realistically, I mean, ideally, I can't speak for everyone, but the way it usually looks is high protein intake, 1.3 to 1.5 grams, good quality, lean food. Carbohydrates, giving you just some that I particularly, most guys use, is carbohydrates, yams, sweet potatoes, and to be honest with you, my imagination really is quite boring. I tend to just eat for what goals are. You can go into, like, you know, certain types of pastas and certain types of breads, but I just tend to kind of keep it very clean cut. Those are kind of your safe carbs. You've got your carbs that you can manipulate with, so pre or post workout you can play with high glycemic carbohydrates. So for instance, they say that white bread, anything fast digesting, because what it does, without getting in too much depth, if you have things like white carbs, or they even say like Jim Stepani is a big fan of Jim Stepani from the States. He's an amazing body transformation coach. You can find him on bodybuilding.com, but he basically advocates having 3 Haribos post workout because basically it just helps sort of, believe it or not, actually boost your hormone levels, and it secretes, it basically boosts your testosterone levels post workout, which is quite interesting. So if you are going to take fast glycemic carbs like Haribo or white bread or anything, you need to understand, I'm not saying that you can have that all the time. It's something that you can only have in very small quantities, really pre or post workout. And that's basically that. So yeah, protein, carbs and fats. And thank you for listening.